Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, my name is Tony Wheeler. I'm actually based in Brisbane, Australia, but actually now live most of my time this year actually in Vietnam. My background role is very much actually in ecosystem building, also with a technology startup background, and I guess what I'm doing here is actually sort of supporting at multiple levels to actually develop the innovation ecosystem for Vietnam.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tuan and I'm with SGInnovate. We are a government-owned organization in Singapore that is set up to build and commercialize deep technologies from Singapore for the world. We have invested for the past 3 years in about 80 companies globally at the early stage to Series A and Series B. Another big part of what it is that we do is to build an international deep tech ecosystem that brings together everyone. We believe that that is always the starting point of commercializing and seeding the ideas for deep tech and how that matters in today's and the future's economy.
Chris Tran, head of Northridge Partners, based in Singapore. We work with the technology startup founders across Southeast Asia to raise capital, grow their business, and exit via M&A.
Great. So like as YellowBlocks is the connectors, so we work greatly with all the ecosystem stakeholders in this innovation space. So including the investors like VCs like Chris, or like we also work with the government agency in terms of like innovation strategies for the country. And especially we also work with the academia. This is like usually the part that is usually forgotten in an ecosystem building strategy. And I think that for now, like Vietnam is the new initiative. So maybe like Tony has been involved quite a bit in this master planning for the strategy. We have a lot of like roundtable discussion across multiple ministries. And also the private and public relationships is growing. So maybe like we can start first with the first question, and later on we have like some questions from the audience. So maybe just start with a very simple question. Why you join TechFest? So why you accepted to fly all the way to try TechFest, you know?
I'm glad that's the question, because I thought the previous one was building to be the question about academia integration and everything else.
No, it's getting there. This is like a primer,
that's
you know?
a super complex question. Why join TechFest? Why be in Vietnam at all? Why spend so much time here? I just think it's an amazing country, amazing people, amazing opportunity. It's a real hotbed. There's so many presentations we've already seen at TechFest and here this afternoon that talk about how to actually leapfrog into the next realm of technology and learn from the rest of the world. I think there's a lot of people here turning up with technology and money. I think that needs to be really balanced very heavily and strongly within Vietnam with actually sound, sophisticated strategy about how to build local capability. I personally, and controversially, I see a lot of people taking advantage of Vietnam right now because of the stage of where it is and its growth and economic cycle. And I'd like to be able to actually build some more sophisticated strategies that create local ownership, local development, local capability, local IP that actually says you actually build the economic base of Vietnam rather than just actually use it as a pool for foreign investment and foreign gain.
All right, so I think in order to answer that, I will need to share with you a little bit about our experiences in the past 3 years since SGInnovate was founded. When the Singapore government set us up to build deep tech, it was with the belief that deep tech would help Singapore sustain our future economic growth. We cannot quantify how much of that growth deep tech could bring to the Singapore economy, but the Singapore government believes, and that's why we carry on that belief. So in the first year, in 2017, we actually set out to bring together the total ecosystem first. Because at that time, when we wanted to commercialize research, and the researchers from universities were not interested in commercializing their research work, they are not incentivized to do so. Their main interest was to put up a research paper, get tenure professorship at the university, that's it. Even if they want to commercialize research, they wouldn't know how or where to talk, who to talk to. So SGInnovate set out to be the first and foremost deep tech investor and partner in Singapore. So over the first year, we grew our ecosystem from just 1,000 people to 16,000 people. From that base, there were more and more pipeline for us to actually invest in. to help researchers from university commercialize their work, and that was the first step of success. And in the second year, we realized that, wait a minute, if we only build things in Singapore, we are not going to be able to have global companies. And the Singapore marketplace is like what? We have 5.5 million people, and it's nothing compared to the larger economy in Southeast Asia. So we started making friends. But at that time, Southeast Asia was not quite ready for us. When we talked to our friends in Indonesia, Thailand, and some in Vietnam, there was no YellowBlocks back then in Vietnam for us to talk to. So we started making friends with North America, particularly Canada. The US was big, but they were not really open to, they think that they did not need the world to work with them. So we talked to Canada, we talked to Western Europe, Australia, and Japan and Korea. And then in the third year, a surprising trend started coming up when everyone was starting to ask us, could Singapore help us get connected with Southeast Asia, specifically Vietnam and Indonesia? And that was when we started to actually step up our engagements in the various parts of Southeast Asia to today. We realized that even though Singapore may have a lead in terms of research capabilities, we have gone beyond just A, B, C, D, E. E to us now is edge computing. And we have added a Q, just quantum technologies, to our mix. At that, we actually have already invested in about 3 or 4 quantum computing companies in Singapore and outside. So I think the reason why we are here in Vietnam, this is already my, I think, 5th or 6th trip to Vietnam this year. We want to have a ASEAN marketplace for startups. That's the very first and foremost one. And the second, we want to unlock the corporate startup collaboration potential across various markets. A lot of the international MNCs that are based in Singapore are looking for startups not just from Singapore. They are looking for startups from Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand as well. And the consensus is that Vietnam not just offers the marketplace and the startup, but also the talent that the startups could actually work with. So this is definitely a market that hits a lot of checkboxes for us to be here.
Chris, you have anything to add to this?
I'm here because Kimiko and my other friend Bobby wanted me to be here. And I also wanted to have some really good pho thai and cafe soda.
Oh, yeah, that's a very honest answer, huh?
And Halong Bay too, I'm sure.
Halong Bay is beautiful.
Okay, so that's the easy question to start with. So the hard question is that now observing all of this one, I'm pretty sure some of you have been to TechFest more than once. So what is your observation, like between coming back to the country for a few times? What is the different movement that we have? And then how you vision, how we can like make it better from the ecosystem building point of view?
Maybe I could take this first. This is actually my first TechFest experience, but I've been to the Vietnam Venture Summit, the Viet AI Summit, and a couple of other events and conferences, right? It is good for a start when Vietnam is starting to build this ABCDE or deep tech or frontier tech ecosystem to start with a lot of general conversations about the impact, the promise of science and technology. However, it comes to a point when I'm starting to feel that we are having a lot of repeat conversations. How it is that we can actually, from a community that we built, let's say if it's 100,000 or 100 or 1,000 people, we can just crystallize into a group of the 1% of people who could actually make things happen together. Whether it is to build a grand challenge for Vietnam deep tech ecosystem, identify the right problems that Vietnam's future smart cities could solve, and how it is that the startups, the investors, the corporates here could pull together resources to solve that. So that would be something that would excite me and SGInnovate and keep us coming back for a lot more in the future years.
Tony, you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. This is my second TechFest. So I was in Da Nang last year, and also I've been to about 170 other events between then and now. Because one of the things there is a lot of in Vietnam right now is events. whether they are big ones, whether they are small ones, whether they're happening 7 days a week all across the place. There's a huge number of events, there's a huge number of conversations. Part of the challenge is, I think, and I agree with your observation about we're having the same conversation. And it's the same people involved in those same conversations. So there is a challenge in terms of actually spreading the message, actually engaging a broader audience about how to actually engage in solution creation. I think picking up on your point about also how do you actually get focused outcomes you're looking for, and it goes back to the previous presentation around the smart cities agenda. Are we actually solving real problems? Things like that can actually help move an ecosystem forward. It will only take it so far, but it can actually help overcome the stagnation that you often appear of going around in circles without actually getting real traction. So it's like, that's one strategy. In terms of actually getting into a deep tech strategy, that's almost a different conversation, because that is more innovation, but it's more research based, it's longer term, it's different funding models, there's a different culture around it. So it's actually not about a single strategy here. It's a complexity of strategies, there's multiple. And I think at the moment that Vietnam hasn't quite got its head around that at this point in time, and we've got a lot of people coming in and selling single strategies about this is the answer, and we actually need to get a little bit more sophisticated around how to actually move the whole conversation forward, but with action.
My wife gets angry at me when I say these words, but I will say these words because I think it's very important. It's actually quite simple. It is very simple. There are many other countries in the world which have wanted to foster an ecosystem. Many other countries in the world which have had endless events, lots of MOUs, lots of fancy signings. It's not a specific to Vietnam, but it is a risk that Vietnam faces. And when I say it's simple, I mean this. The money will change the ecosystem. Because rewarding the entrepreneurs to take the risk to build the companies of tomorrow by solving the problems of today will make sure that they can convince their parents that they didn't waste their parents' time in foregoing their education, right? Rewarding the investors will ensure that you can bring in the more investment dollars to say, I was early, I was right, this is fantastic, and more investors will come in. Creating the businesses that are big, right, and actually generating benefits to society will ensure that the people that are looking at how do we protect the society will have a look at how technology is actually providing a net benefit and will be less fearful because they see the results, right? And also, when they see the results and when they see the results of more money coming into an ecosystem, when they see bigger companies able to pay more taxes, that will solve a lot of problems. So for us, we look at it as very simple. What the ecosystem needs is the money to support the entrepreneurs, because they're the heroes that sacrifice everything to make a difference. That's number one. Number two, the entrepreneurs to back them, right? And then everyone needs to ensure that the story is one where people feel trust, comfortable, and rewarded to take these risks, to generate these returns, and then you will see a self-sustaining ecosystem. And that matters a lot more than events and other things.
Okay, so the hard question is like how to channel those ready money to Vietnam. Tony?
I was just smiling all the way through that because Chris and I sit on a few panels together, and we laughed the other day because we sat on one and didn't actually disagree with each other. So I'm glad we're back to our normal position now where I completely disagree with him. And it's just this, and again, what I mean about simplistic notions and simplistic situations or scenarios. Yes, money is incredibly important. Adding it to things that actually make a genuine difference rather than just building a capitalistic notion in society. If you look at the downside and you just look at Silicon Valley and you look at the long-term downside of actually just playing for VC funds and building that dream, the psychological, social, emotional cost of that is just unbelievable. Silicon Valley suffered with it. Australia's been going through it now for some time. And this is one of the things I'm hoping that Vietnam can avoid. So is attracting money important? Absolutely. is actually being balanced with strategies that actually make a difference, which are culturally aligned to this country and that will actually make a sustainable system, incredibly important. I don't think attracting money to Vietnam right now is the problem. You've got countries lining up to throw money, FDI, into Vietnam right now. The biggest question we keep getting asked, or I keep getting asked, is basically, where do I put it? We've got huge funds sitting here saying, who do I invest in? What's the next big thing? What's the next unicorn? What's next after VNG? There's no shortage of money for this country, which is interesting because compared to Australia, we're this, I was going to say little island, we're this massive island, but in the middle of nowhere, very remote. And so attracting investment to us is incredibly hard. Getting investment into Vietnam right now is actually pretty easy. You've got people lining up to do it. We've got to become smarter at how we utilize that investment and where the investment actually goes into capacity and local capability building as opposed to money just coming in, exits happening, and then money going back out.
Tony, I'm really delighted that we're friends. Number
Maybe.
two, thank you for buying me lunch when I ran out of dong. And number three...
Typical investment banker, doesn't bring his wallet.
And number three, I'm going to disappoint you right here and now because this is the disappointment. I agree with you, Tony. I'm sorry. I tried because, you know, you're here and we're trying to entertain you as well. But I'm sorry, I agree with Tony this time because he's right. It's the quality of money. He's absolutely right. I'm sorry, Tony. It's the quality of money. Now, the issue is this. Vietnam's getting money now, but do you want the quality of money? Do you want the quality of money to come in so that you will get the next round of money, right? It's the quality of money. Do you want the money that looks at how can we make sure that more people are winners rather than just the big guys? Can you make sure that the Vietnamese domestic people and the foreigners are both winners? And that's the hope, and that's the message. We need to think about the money and the quality of money. I'm sorry to agree with you, Tony. I know you wanted something else.
It's a good thing that I sit in between you guys then. No, I want to just have a different spin on the question. It is how to attract money into deep tech investments, because I think that Vietnam has done very, very well on investments into tech. But investment into deep tech or frontier tech, which is what we are talking about, is entirely different. It takes a lot more patient capital to make it happen. When we first started, nobody knew how to do due diligence into an AI in healthcare company without having a healthcare expert in-house to do that. And so we were the lone investor in a lot of the deals. And we started building a community of investors who were interested in building deep tech innovations, right? So it took us 2 years to build a network of 22 VCs who are based in Singapore with a regional mandate. And we pulled together, over the past 1 year, a total capital of $500 million deployed in deep tech. And it took us about 3 or 4 years to get to where we are today. And at this point, I want to once again agree with you both as well, that the money is always there. It is the quality of ideas that matter. So a lot of the startups, so we review about 400 to 500 different startups on a quarterly basis. So every year we look at almost 2,000 such companies. Everyone who came to us would think that they are the only one in the world that is doing that. But that's not usually the case. And so I think that while there's a lot of money, how it is that Vietnam can show itself as an attractive deep tech destination to bring the right quality of money, because deep tech investment stays for a lot longer than what the usual one would do.
Okay, I think that I'm going to disagree with you three then, to make Chris happy, because like you know he just want to have. Well, of course, like I think that the viewpoint from the investment point of view is that like the money is ready, where do we put it? But I think that from the ecosystem point of view, like because after I think that after the were anyone, oh yeah, Chris and me was like the judge for the semi-final round of the Startup World Cup yesterday. So I think that like after a few like startup competition judgment, I don't know like how Tony can do that for like the last 2 years, but maybe for me like only after 5 or 6, I'm getting like the notion that I think the problem is that the startup founders. We have too many staff founders and a few staff founders. What I mean by that is that most of the staff founders, when I met, they don't really fully understand what is on the table in terms of like the options that they have. So always like these polarized viewpoints. Either one of them, they say, okay, I'm going to be the unicorn in the next 5 years, and then Series A, Series B, and they have like their plan. But it's also very, it's not about the vision that they have, but the mindset. Like they only know one way, like unicorn or not, and like very polarized view. And then some of the founders that I met also, they think that okay, I have bootstrapped 5 years. For now, I'm going to bootstrap me until like unicorns. That's also like a polarized viewpoint. And I think that for now, even for me, like when I wrote the article on Vietcetera, I need to like do a lot of research because there's no one-stop shop for the source of information that we want to seek, especially as a staff founder, where to start. When you do like the Google search, even for the Vietnamese, like the problem is that we have too many accelerators, too many incubators program. And when I go to like the different batches, sometimes it's usually like the same faces of the startups. So I think that is like the signal that we can see like for the very early stage of the ecosystem. So my personal interest is like, for now, like a lot of course, the VC, when they come in, they always say, okay, can you introduce to me some potential startup to invest in? And I say, okay, please wait, because like my purpose is like, how can we have more of these like founder, even early stage, but like standardized quality?
I'm so sorry, Kimiko, but I'm actually going to agree with you. And the word I'm going to use is there's too much noise. And when you look at the startup founders, there's not enough thinking around. Let's make no mistake, Industry 4.0 is here. And it's the first time in world history that all of East, West, China, India, Japan, Korea, everyone is fighting this technological race. The first time in the world. And capital, talent, right, is moving fast, quick, unabated, wherever it likes. First time in history. And when you look back through all the noise, what the founders aren't articulating enough is enough differentiation on why I'm unique. So I agree. There isn't enough thinking around what unique benefits do you have being in Vietnam, rather than just taking an American model, right, quite frankly, because, it's like we're going to be the Uber of this. You don't have to be the Uber of this. You don't have to be the Ali of this, right? There is not enough thinking around why are we different and why in the competition for capital, right? Let's be really clear. We deserve, and let's be clear, your quality capital, and let's be clear about deep tech as well. Your quality capital and your long-term commitment, and this is our clear proposition. If you think about Japan, first country to westernize, fantastic hardware quality, excellent. You think about Korea, wonderful hardware, fantastic culture, right? Very clear proposition. You think about Vietnam, unfortunately, there is a conception, oh, it's great, it's booming, wow. But not enough people know about the high quality manufacturing. Not enough people know, right, about the 2 engineering hubs. Not enough people know around, okay, we've had Indonesia produce 5 unicorns and they've gone to the next, consumer upgrade. The next one is Vietnam. Not enough people think about that. And I agree with you. There's too much noise and not enough clear differentiation.
Well, you make me feel like the branding agency for Vietnam. Because like all of the event that I go to and speak, I have very clear message. Okay. So I think that that's a lot of information to digest. So if like the audience, if you have any particular question that want to ask the panelists here.
What I didn't hear from, I am not enough. What I didn't hear from the discussion, given the topic that has been chosen, which is an ecosystem building strategy, it is not clear to me what is missing. And I refer, because we can only reflect back on what certain locates where the ecosystem has been built, whether it's Singapore, whether it's Israel, whether it's the US. So in Singapore, it's clearly government-driven. It is clear, government-driven, and one key pillar that allowed the startup to flourish was National University of Singapore. Very clear. Built the first Block 71. They had programs to groom the next generation of startup founders. And then, of course, you have this percolating effect. Israel all come from defense. The guys that were doing their national service came out, they built startups. And they're very entrepreneurial. Clearly, in Vietnam, it's entrepreneurial. But what I cannot distill in the discussion, where's the government in this? Where's the university in this? It seems to be all centered around money. And of course, ambitious young people of Vietnam who wants to be the next billionaire. But where's the strategy and where's the pillar that we're talking about in this panel?
Excellent question. And this goes back to my earlier premise about I am slightly terrified in Vietnam of the amount of emphasis that's actually being placed on the Silicon Valley model and the pursuit of capital. Where does the total ecosystem actually fit into this? What does a comprehensive strategy look like? Where does government fit? Where does deep tech fit? Where do the researchers, the universities, and everyone else? You're right, at the moment there is no unifying strategy. You raised examples of Singapore and Israel. If you look at Taiwan, they have a national strategy. Thailand has a national strategy. Vietnam is in the process of creating it. So literally about a month, 4 to 6 weeks ago, Resolution 52 was passed and announced, which was about the industrialization, Industry 4.0. MPI, Ministry of Planning and Investment, with their National Innovation Center strategy. MOST with 844, they're about to launch 844 Plus, which is actually a more comprehensive national startup support strategy. We're actually looking at provincial government strategies. So a lot of these conversations are starting to occur in the background. They are not public yet. And this is part of the challenge. So I think the next 6 to 12 months of Vietnam is very critical because that national strategy has to be coalesced, it has to be brought together, it has to be communicated incredibly well and coherently, but recognizing that there's a national strategy, there's a national identity competing on specific pillars and strengths, but then it needs to get localized down to specific provincial strategies. So at the moment, you've got 63 provinces in Vietnam that have actually just been issued Resolution 52 that says, you will do this. And that's one of the pros and cons for Vietnam, that you actually have a centralist party that actually issues a resolution or a decree and the country has to respond. So what that does mean is that you actually can have some coherence. 63 provinces are currently figuring out at the moment what the heck does Industry 4.0 mean to me in Bến Tre or Vung Tau or Dong Thap or Hue? And they're going, as a People's Committee level, it's like, what budget do we need for that? What technological resources do we need for that? Everyone knows about technology. Everyone knows that everyone's screaming for FDI and local investment. But and this goes back to the founders and the pitches. One of the big challenges for Vietnam that I see right now is actually not engineering capability. It's very good. The manufacturing history is very good. The willingness to engage in deep tech willingness is there. Do they have the experience? Not yet. There is a lack of experience of how to actually take a business to market. So when we see a lot of pitches repeatedly, it's like, I've got this idea, I'm going to be the next Facebook, I'm going to be the next Google, I'm going to be a unicorn, I'm bootstrapping, I'll be there in 6 months, just back me. But it's like, where's your managing experience? And this is one of the reasons why globally we know the statistics are most successful startups are started by people who are 45 years of age and above. Because they are actually been there in industry, they've got deep experience, industry vertical experience, they see a problem, they see a niche, and they actually say, we actually now build a solution, but I know how to manage a business. Supporting university students to actually become entrepreneurial is fundamentally important because that's the next generation. But we need to actually integrate our research activities, our deep tech, our patient capital, as you said before, all combined behind a national strategy, whether it's a smart city strategy, whether it's actually pulling together Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh, whatever else, with a regional localized one. But there's this very strong need for a comprehensive story and a comprehensive strategy. I know there's conversations about that right now, but it's actually quite disconnected from events like this, unfortunately.
If I may just add, I don't have sufficient knowledge about the Vietnam ecosystem yet to say why it is that it's not happening the way it should be. But from the Singapore's experience, I want to add to what you share that yes, in Singapore things have been kick-started first by the government. So there are strategies that are put in place, nice white papers and so on. But the most crucial factor that makes sure that the ecosystem grows and be effective is still the community players themselves. So you mentioned the National University of Singapore and US Enterprise and the Block 71. There are a lot more examples such as TechNode. They have been doing that not just in Singapore but also in Southeast Asia. SGInnovate is working with at least 100 different community players, and these are the ones that make sure that things in Singapore happen, not the government mandate. And I think that that should be the case in all the other markets in Southeast Asia as well. There's only a degree to which the government can set the general direction. So for example, when Singapore's 5 different economic ministers sat together in 2016 to say that there are 7 recommendations to push forward Singapore's future economy, they mentioned innovation, and there were 2 paragraphs under that, nothing else. And how do we interpret that, right? So there was no one to tell us that, hey, you should focus on, I don't know, AI or data. It all came from the active people, the men, the women, the founders, the researchers, the investors who figured it out. Yeah, so I think that has been the experience that we see in Singapore. In Vietnam, the one thing that we notice is that each locations try to do the best in its own city. So Hanoi wants to be the best, Ho Chi Minh City wants to be the best, and now Nguyen wants to be the AI center of Vietnam. So how should Vietnam reconcile all of these different interests and make sure that there is a good bright spot for international players to enter the market, especially for deep tech?
Well, I think that's a lot to discuss, and maybe like I just summarize the key points that we discussed here today. So of course, like it's beyond our control to discuss about the real like national ecosystem building strategies. But as the ecosystem stakeholders and the key players, so for us like as the connector in Vietnam market, what we care about is like how to improve upon the existing ecosystem. So for us, like already each of the ecosystem stakeholders, they have their own like, strategies and plan. But the way how we unleash is how we can connect them more and like do more collaborations. And then like to have the joint initiative. So that's our purpose. And maybe I want to like wrap up this discussion by each of the speaker. Maybe you can give like one word, your advice, either your advice or like, like your recommendations. It can be like an action or like the upcoming initiative that you want to see in Vietnam for the next year. So very actionable.
Persevere.
Sorry, what's that?
Persevere. Keep going.
Okay.
For me, there will be two things. After you persevere, you need to show your value, right? Whether it is to solve a particular problems, healthcare, transportation, finance for the unbanked, for example. And the second part is that based on what we are observing in Singapore, the idea of AI ethics and fairness is coming up a lot. And soon enough, when AI and all the ABCDE of technology start to mature in Vietnam, the conversation of how AI and data sharing should be done in a fair, ethical way would emerge. And Singapore is now working around how to develop framework for that in order to scale up AI solutions across various industries. So I think that eventually Vietnam should preempt this regulatory consideration. I know that some of the ministries are starting to ask international partners who have experiences in this factor to share what it is that they have done to build regulatory framework to allow for such a thriving ecosystem and not have a situation where the regulations are playing catch up with the technology.
It was a really long one word. Choose your partners wisely, learn and invest in local capability and capacity development.
Okay, thank you everyone for giving us like really great insight and like very resourceful case studies that we can learn from other countries. So you can like connect directly with the speakers afterwards. And for now, I think thank you for the panel discussion. Let's take a group photo first.
Don't disagree.